Thomas and the new engine. The trains on the island of Sodor are kept very busy. There are always lots of jobs to do. One morning, Sir Topham Hatt came to see the engines. He had a very important announcement to make. A new engine has arrived on the island, he announced. His name is Neville. I want all of you to make him feel welcome. Thomas, you are to collect the piece of ironwork so the bridge can be repaired immediately, he added. Thomas waited at the signal box. The signalman told him what to do. The bridge ahead is unsafe, he said. Thomas, you are to take it to the bridge immediately so that the bridge can be repaired and the workmen can repair it. Yes, sir, said Thomas, and he puffed away. At the yards, Harry and Bert were with Neville. Neville was a steamy, and he had a square body like a diesel. He was a very modern new engine. Neville was backing up towards some trucks. Nearly there, said Harry cheekily. Nearly there, said Bert naughtily. Then there was trouble. Watch where you're going, careless engine, Harry and Bert laughed naughtily. Thomas arrived at the yard. He saw the new engine, Neville. There he is, said Thomas. There's Neville, the new engine. He must be friends with the Diesels, Harry and Bert. They're laughing naughtily with him. Then Thomas pulled into Knapford Station. James was waiting there. Have you seen the new engine, Neville, yet? Asked James. Yes, said Thomas. I saw him at the yards with Harry and Bert. They were teasing him. James was surprised. A steamy friendly with the Diesels? How could he asked. As Thomas left, Edward pulled in. Have you heard about Neville, the new engine? Asked James. And he started to tell Edward all about Neville. Later, Edward was taken on water. He was talking to Percy about Neville. That new steamy Neville is best friends with the Diesels, Harry and Bert, Edward pouted. He never wants to be with steamies. How do you know? Asked Percy. How do you know that Neville doesn't want to be with steamies? James told me and Thomas told him, whistled Edward. Later, Percy stopped and saw Emily at a red signal. Don't go near Neville, the new engine, he told her seriously. Harry and Bert had told him to biff him to steamies. Edward told me, James told Edward, and they heard all about it from Thomas. Later, Thomas arrived at the station with the bridge section. Sir Topham Hatt was there waiting. Thomas, you must warn all engines not to cross the bridge until it's repaired, said Sir Topham Hatt. Thomas was relieved. Just then he heard an engine coming. He also heard the engine whistle. It was Neville pulling Annie and Clarabelle. Neville was new. Hello, said Neville cheerfully. I'm not talking to you, said Thomas angrily. Neville didn't know what he had done. Just then, Emily pulled in. Hello, said Neville happily. Emily angrily let out a wheeze of steam. It's no use trying to be friends with me, said Emily. I know you're going to biff into all the steamies, just like Harry and Bert told you to, Neville. Thomas was surprised, but the station master blew his whistle. And Neville chuffed away. "Where did you hear that Neville was going to biff into all the steamies?" said Thomas. "Don't you know?" Emily whistled. "Percy told me, Edward told Percy, James told Edward, and you told James," said Emily. "But I only said to James that I'd seen Neville with Harry and Bert," said Thomas. Just then, Toby puffed in. "Have you heard about Neville?" asked Toby. "Henry saw Harry and Bert be horrible to him at the yards, and they didn't feel hurt." Emily couldn't believe her ears. Thomas couldn't believe it either, so Neville wasn't friends with Harry and Bert after all. He felt very foolish. Where was Neville going? Emily asked. "Cinders and ashes," cried Thomas. "Neville's heading for the broken bridge. I must stop him right away." Neville was speeding through the countryside as fast as he could. Suddenly, Neville saw a barrier on the tracks. He slammed on his brakes. But it was too late. Neville was in terrible trouble. He was on the broken end of the bridge. Thomas knew it was all his fault. Then, suddenly, he had an idea. Slowly and steadily, he buffered up behind Clarabelle. Slowly and steadily, he began to pull Neville back from the edge. The bridge made a creaking noise. Thomas knew he must hurry. He pulled as hard as he could, and with one big puff, he pulled Neville's wheels off the bridge. Thomas had done it. He had saved Neville and Annie and Clarabelle. "Thank you," said Neville cheerfully. "I should have warned you," said Thomas, "but I was too busy believing silly stories. I thought you hated steamies, but now I know I was wrong, and I'm very sorry, Neville." Neville gave Thomas a loud, friendly toot. At last he had a good friend in Thomas.